survive and the U.S. will not. So the only thing that we can do to avoid a situation like that is make it clear to them that they won't even survive with 500 million, that our forces are so overwhelmingly superior that they have no hope. And there are two ways that we are overwhelmingly superior. Their Navy is literally, I don't know, maybe a tenth the size of ours. For a while, they what? Okay. Well, what I was going to say is that we have to make it clear to the Chinese that they have no hope of surviving with hundreds of millions of Chinese and the U.S. just being wiped out, that our forces are overwhelmingly superior. And in the realm of navies, for a while the Chinese, when they had a lot of money, were spending it on building up their navy. But it's possible that the economic effects of our Cold War with them will reduce the amount of money they have to spend on their navy, and will maintain a vast superiority over theirs. Now, this is important because a lot of the war between China and the U.S. would be naval, obviously in the around Japan and Korea. So, if we have overwhelming superiority in the Navy, and we manage to get rid of the people that they have stealing our technology, we may be able to keep a technological advantage over them in the realm of hypersonic weapons and I don't know, ways of defending, whatever, the most advanced weapons. If we can maintain a dramatic superiority over them, then they're less likely to go crazy and start taking the risk of nuclear war with us.
Do you think the risk of nuclear war has been reduced since the Cold War by having other means of waging war that doesn't risk, destroying the planet, namely cyber warfare and automated warfare, I guess would be another thing?
Well, I mean, it turns out that Russia, our main enemy in the Cold War, is just too weak. I mean, they're so far behind us that nuclear war with us would just end up being suicide for them. So really what you're looking at now is China. And what we're finding out is that the Chinese are very aggressive. They want stuff. They want to control Hong Kong in a way that is very imperialistic. They want to take over Taiwan. They enjoy using Korea to get at us. There are a variety of things that indicate that the Chinese are on the move. They've taken all the money that they got from their economic miracle that we helped them with, and they took all that money and built the most advanced weapons. They're ahead of us, as I say, possibly in hypersonic weapons. So they're very, very aggressive. And, the way I see us getting out of this is that at a certain point, we may have to say to Japan that they need to develop their military or help us develop ours even bigger, contribute in some way. Because the Japanese are sitting ducks. And the Chinese know that if Japan ever militarized, they would be a deadly threat to China. The Chinese have a great respect for Japan, and they should, because, Japan would be a leading military country if they wanted to be. So there's that, which frankly I don't want Japan to be that powerful because they might turn on us. But the point is that at a certain point, I believe the U.S. will make it legally difficult and by laws and attractive by taxes for businesses to leave China. And so if China has a sucking of the industries of the rest of the world out of their country, and by the way, that's already happening even as I speak, then
Who did you say is going to make it attractive for businesses to leave China?
well, tax incentives, like no taxes for the years that you leave China and set up a business in the U.S.
But
Or
what about? Okay, go ahead. Finish your point.
or they could also pass laws stating that you can't build a business in China because they're our deadly enemy. And, it's just you can't help the enemy by building their businesses. So there are things that the U.S. government can do to, damage to damage the Chinese economy, besides tariffs, besides encouraging the rest of the world to pull out of China. In other words, China is such a bad actor. It's so reviled by so many countries on earth now that we could literally weaken their economy to the point that they can't afford to build the weapons they want to build. It comes down to money. If they have the same economic abilities that India has, then we don't have to worry that much that they're going to come at us with some kind of Star Wars level weapon, because they just won't have the money to build it.
All right, two things. One is to finish off with Trump. I forgot to mention that 6 months ago, Trump was taken to Walter Reed Army Medical Center on a Saturday, kind of on what looked to be an emergency basis. And we never got the truth of what that visit was. And people have been arguing that it's connected with what liberal Twitter argues is his mental deterioration, but nobody knows. So that's just nobody knows, because they said, oh, he just needed to start his annual checkup, but that's a thing that isn't done that way. All right, thing two is back to China.
Well, wait, can I respond to the Trump thing?
Sure.
Because it's a separate subject. Okay,
Yep.
Look, briefly. Trump has gone through so many crises and handled so many personal attacks, so many crises to the U.S., done so many incredibly correct decisions that I have to say I'm more impressed with his mental abilities now than I was in 2016. If anything, I have to say this. I'm a pretty arrogant guy, but I don't think I could have done anywhere near the job that Trump has. I mean, I'm very respectful. I look up to him intellectually. I think he's a genius.
Okay. All right. The next thing is, you were talking about sucking talent out of China and industry out of China. And so for everything Trump's done, to fight China, he's also, part of his deal is, he says he doesn't want people, he's kind of tried to put a limit on Chinese coming here to study, right?
I'd hope so.
But that's a tough. If you're trying to steal industry and talent from China, then it's maybe counterproductive to make it tough for Chinese to come here to study. Now, I understand the logic, which is they study here and then they take it back there. But the game is for Chinese to come here to study and then to stay here to build businesses and do research.
Yeah. The last thing I want is for Chinese to come here and then stay here and get high up in our defense industry. That is the last thing I want, Rick.
Okay, so let's move on. Trump threatened, I mean, this is just goofy, and it's just Trump tweeting stuff, but Trump wants to sue CNN for a presidential poll that they released that showed Biden far ahead. And most polls, I mean, state polls are different. Like, I guess Trump and Biden, according to one recent poll, are tied in Arkansas. But when you look at national polls, Biden, it has about a 10-point lead, which is far more than the lead Hillary had at the same. We've got 20 weeks to go until the election, and Biden is several percentage points ahead of where Hillary was at this with 20 weeks to go. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the country that doesn't look good in light of the Reagan's question, which is, I guess he asked this question in 1980 when he was running against Carter, which is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And when you look at the country now, there's a lot of stuff that looks bad.
Can I respond?
Yep.
Okay, so actually, by sheer luck, I did find out about those polls. CNN is not a news organization. It's an arm of the Democrat Party. And so what the Democrats are trying to do is to present an image of indomitability. So they want to show that despite Biden's feeble-mindedness, he's set to win, and so don't count out Biden because he's going to be your next president. Now, the reason that Trump wants to sue them is because they polled mainly Democrats. They did a poll where Democrats were overrepresented, and they polled people that were unlikely to vote, people that had no record of voting in the past few elections. And furthermore, it was a national poll. Now, there are three reasons that's fucked up. The first is that if you poll people that haven't voted for the past few elections, you're basically getting nothing. Because there's nothing accurate about that, because you don't know if they're going to vote. It means nothing. So they try to poll people that are regular voters. The second thing is national polls aren't that impressive because, as you know, bitterly, I'm sure, Trump can lose the national vote and still win if he wins the Electoral College. So national polls are not that helpful either. They're somewhat helpful, but not as helpful as polls of the swing states. And finally, when you get together a group of people that you're polling, if you're an honest pollster, you try to get the people to be represented accurately. So 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, or maybe you include 10% undecided, but they didn't do that. What they did was
the demographic recipe right now is
45, 45, 43, and then 7
no,
undecided.
it's 30 each, Republicans and Democrats, and 40% independents, because that is, yeah.
Right, but what Trump is saying is they didn't do that. They weighted the poll towards Democrats so that they could get this result that they could throw up on the news and everyone would say, yeah, Biden's coming on strong. So that's why he wants to sue him, and I don't blame him.
But, I mean, even when Fox does polls, and I don't like looking at individual, it's easy not to look at individual polls, and you can go to a poll aggregator like 538, which and there are other poll aggregators, and if I get really deep into it, sometimes I'll look at other aggregators where they take every poll that they consider legit, and they assign, like 538 assigns a letter grade, from A to F, with most polling companies being in the B's and C's.
Okay, I know. You can take an aggregate poll and get a better result, and they will still show Trump behind. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So my argument is this. The Democrats in the blue states have continued the lockdown and look like they're going to continue it as long as possible. And as long as the Democrats can do that, they will have a stranglehold over the economy. Now, Texas,
Well,
Florida,
California's opening up. Disneyland's opening up like next week. I
no,
could.
Disneyland's opening up July 17th. Okay,
Okay.
so
All
no,
right.
but the point is that
My
Illinois,
gyms are opening up. One already opened.
okay,
Two of them already opened up, and the other
okay,
ones are opening in the
yeah, I
next
know, but
day.
that's. But the point I'm trying to make is all of the blue states are late. And there are some blue states that are still locked down. I mean, I think Illinois said that they may not let people go to a church for a year. So, you know, Massachusetts, New York, Oregon, uh, Illinois, there are a lot of blue states that are locked down, Michigan. And so, as long as they stay locked down, the economy is crippled and Trump may lose because that was his big thing is that he helped the economy. So all I can say is if they want to destroy the American economy to get elected, then I wouldn't put it past them, and it looks like that's what they're going to do.
Well, I mean, so we can talk about the corona, because um, the number of deaths has been declining, if not steadily. It's we've been there are a lot of days now where we're under 1,000 deaths nationwide. The
Yeah.
number of cases has remained steady at between 20 and 25,000 every day, and people expect the cases to go up because the states are opening up. Florida, in the past 3 days, not counting today because Sunday doesn't count because a lot of places don't report on Sunday, but in the 3 days previous to that, the number of new cases set records by 20%, then 12% above that, then 38% above that. And it's similar for about 10 other states that are setting records for most new cases. So even as they're opening up, California is opening up at the same time, but it's had the most new cases ever.
Yeah, well, my response is two things. The first is that I don't think anybody's ever clear on how much these new cases depend on the fact that we're doing more testing than ever before. I mean, it's kind of obvious, and I mean, I would be very sorry to see that something this stupid is what's confusing people. But I know fact one, we're doing vastly more testing than we've ever done. It's getting easier, cheaper, more extensive, and so inevitably you're going to find more cases. So that is my explanation for the rise of cases. But the second point I want to make is that I was aware of what you were going to say. The reason I was aware of that was because all week long I've been hearing about Texas breaking records with how many new cases they're having because of their injudicious unlocking. And this now you say the same with Florida. And for that reason, I check the overall death rate every day. And it turns out that the number of deaths in Texas is plummeting, even though they've been open now for 3 or 4 weeks. They've consistently been far more open than California. And both Florida and Texas, in spite of these record cases, have a plummeting death rate, uh, as well as the entire United States. So if anybody's interested, go to Worldometer. You can see the charts where it says number of cases, uh, and it's always really high. It's always going up. But then scroll down a few inches lower, and you'll see number of deaths, and it's always plummeting. It's been plummeting since mid-April. So the high point of deaths in the U.S. was around April 21st, and ever since then, it's been plummeting down. So what this tells me is that if unlocking was so dangerous, then we should have the opposite effect. The number of bodies should be skyrocketing, but it isn't. It's actually it's plummeting.
Well,
So,
plummeting is a relative thing.
no, well, it's gone from 3,000 in one day to roughly 450. So, I mean, every life is precious, but it's plummeting. All you have to do is look at the chart, and you can see that coronavirus is basically spent. And so my point is that any argument now that unlocking is going to be a disaster, that's just simply a lie, and it's evil to frighten people like this.
So, well, my response to that is we'll see. The number of deaths has gone from 15,000 a week to 5,000 a week. And we'll see if it stays at that level, if it goes down, if it goes up. I think it's still a little too soon to see whether the opening is going to, I mean, we could talk about, I don't want to waste time on talking about how we have gotten smarter about some things, like protecting old age homes better maybe than in the early stages.
Maybe we'll just learn to live with it, Rick, which is what people do. You live with the fact that there are chances that things can get you. You could get Lyme disease. There are things out there.
You got to talk about it. Anyway, Trump is going to have his rally on the 20th, 6 days from now, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His campaign manager is bragging. It's an arena that holds about 19,000 people. But his campaign manager has bragged that he's received 800,000 ticket requests. So there are going to be obviously a lot of people in the arena, and then a lot of people on the outside of the arena.
Yeah.
And if to make a ticket request, you have to sign a waiver that says that you won't sue anybody if you end up catching COVID.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, that's another wait and see thing. And I'm okay if we don't. You have anything else to talk about?
I just want to respond to that.
Okay.
The fact that Trump is going to start giving monster rallies, I'm happy for Trump, but I also feel it's symbolic. It's basically saying, you know what, guys, we're done with the Wuhan virus. We're going back to normal life, and here I'm the president. I'm going to be here with thousands of other Republicans, and we're going to show you that we're not afraid anymore, and we're going to do this, and you can too. So I think if your goal is to get America back to where it was in January, back to a normal country, then this is really the best possible thing you can do. This is better than arguing or talking to the press or trying to send out tweets. He's just having a giant rally with thousands of people, and we're just saying, fuck you to the Wuhan virus. It's over.
Well, maybe not. The average Trump member of Trump's base is 53 years old. Most are overweight, and roughly half are either diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Yeah, and they have red necks and white pasty skin. They carry a sidearm, and they have an American flag, and they're all racist. Go ahead.
I'm just saying none of those things that you just mentioned are comorbidities. But if if the average member of the Trump space is 53, that means that more than a third of the people showing up to this thing will be over 60, which puts them in a slightly higher risk group. Being overweight increases risk, and being diabetic or pre-diabetic increases risk. So anyway, but I'll just say we'll see. I mean.
All right. By the way, that movement was because there's a person that I live with that frightened me just then. I live with somebody that tries to frighten me now and then. Does the lovely Carol frighten you? Does she ever jump out at you or hide
Every
behind
once in a
something and
while, but
scream?
I do it more, and then I feel bad every time because I feel like I've caused a huge release of adrenaline into her system, and that can't be healthy. So I try not to scare her. Our dogs scare her 3 times a night. She's sleeping in a different bedroom tonight because there's usually one dog on the bed, in the bed we both sleep in, and the dogs go off 3 times a night. They hear some bullshit, and they decide it needs to be barked at, and they throw themselves off the bed, and it shakes the bed, and Carol always thinks it's an earthquake. And so Carol, I don't scare Carol much anymore because I don't want to flood her with adrenaline. But the dogs, they scare her all the fucking time.
Well, I want to say two things. First of all, you probably need a dog trainer to break that habit. But secondly, I just want to say to all the, I know that there's a lot of single guys that watch this show, living in their mom's basement, and I just want you to know that when you live with another person, it's very easy to frighten that person or for that person to frighten you. You can come around a corner and they're standing there, or they're, you didn't hear them, you didn't know you were in the shower, and suddenly they're standing there, maybe with a knife. So it's very easy when you live with someone to have these scares. Don't you think, Rick?
Yeah, and it's fun to do. It's just that, I'm in my heart attack years. And, Carol's not far behind me, and I don't need to, strip her gears by, it's scaring the person you live with is more for your 20s and 30s.
All right. Well, I think we can leave it at that. Anything else before we go?
No, that's it.
All right. I don't know. This is we should hate each other now. I don't know what happened. If for those of you that wanted to see chair throwing or vicious insults, I'm sorry. I'd like to apologize. I don't know what happened. I just don't feel that angry. I don't know what happened. Rick, what happened? Why are we not screaming?
Well, because I feel better late. Like at some point every week, I always feel bad that I've let down the liberal side with my shitty arguing, but lately I've been feeling like reality itself is making the arguments for me. So I feel
all right. Gaining
also
confidence.
Well, I mean, it's just Biden's roughly, our director's asking for numbers about Biden. Biden's roughly 10 points ahead of Trump with 20 weeks to go. And if you want to dive into it, you can find out how much numbers are likely to change in over this period of time. At some point, a lead of 10 points becomes insurmountable because you only have 2 days to go. In Hillary's case, that wasn't the case because with 8 days to go, James Comey announced that she was under investigation by the FBI again for her emails, which is a whole long story. I won't go into it, but emails showed up on her assistant's computer, which was being used by the assistant's perverted husband, Anthony Weiner, who went to prison for doing sex stuff online with underage girls. That was this whole thing. And anyway, so the announcement from the head of the FBI 8 days before last election was like the biggest of what they call an October surprise. And it maybe cost Hillary 2 or 3% of the vote. But that was unprecedented. Shit like that doesn't usually happen. And so at some point, if Biden has a legit 10-point lead with 15 days to go, it would take a huge surprise to upset that. We still have 20 weeks, and we still have the debates and the national convention. So it's still way too soon to and we don't even know how we're going to vote because we don't know what the coronavirus is going to do between now and then and what the Senate is going to do about voting between now and then, whether people will vote by mail or whether they'll be forced to go to the polls. There's still too much going on. But it looks better for the Democrats than it did 4 years ago.
There are two things that I'm looking at, okay? The first is that usually when a country is having riots, now this happened in the 60s and 70s. I don't know if it'll happen this time. But usually when a country's having riots, they vote for the leader that is most conservative, who looks like he'll be more law and order.
Trump himself has been tweeting law and order.
Yeah, I know. He's been tweeting it. I don't know if he's carrying it out, frankly. But my point is the riots will affect the election. But I'm gonna go out on a limb here and I'm gonna say this. The last unemployment report showed unemployment to be a massive 13%, which is, insane. If we stayed at that level, America would end up like a third world country in a couple of years. It is going down, though, and it's going down very greatly, precipitously. So my argument is this. If it keeps going down and it hits 8%, which is very high, it'll still be very high by election time, but people will have confidence. They'll see that it's going down. Enough people will be going back to work that people will say, well, unemployment is not what it was before Wuhan virus, but it's obviously getting better. On the other hand, Rick, it's 13% now. And if by
16 because they made a mistake in calculating.
Okay, but if by November 8th, by election day, if the unemployment is still around 13 or 16 or 11, then I don't know how Trump can win. So the economy has to really bounce back, and I don't know if there's enough time for it to bounce back. So you got me there. All right, that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Bye.
Director, we good? Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Sorry for no yelling. Good.